America, chaos in cities coast to coast, violent clashes between police and protesters, officers dragged through the streets of Chicago, a police cruiser plowing into a crowd in New York, nationwide cars and buildings torched, police responding with rubber bullets and tear gas, a nation on edge, new curfews announced across the country, the National Guard called up in unprecedented numbers as officials fear more momentum as this may lead to a coronavirus surveying fire and fury. Right now, more protests underway in cities large and small, bracing for what comes next after street clashes last night, some turning violent over an act of violence as states are relying on the National Guard to help keep the peace. This as it is now a growing backlash against our country's largest police force and new concern about the spread of COVID as crowds gather.
The nation erupted into scenes of chaos, violence, and widespread destruction into the early morning hours. Dozens of American cities up in flames after some protests turned into riots, often followed by looting as a nation simmering with unrest unraveled.
How long can you...
In Los Angeles, hours before a curfew was ordered, the city became a war zone. After attempting to breach television studios, large groups torched police cruisers as officers fired back with rubber bullets. Heard by pockets of anarchy nationwide, described as all hell breaking loose in Seattle when police lost control of downtown, crowds destroyed, then took over their vehicles. This video capturing one man removing a high-powered police rifle before a plainclothes security guard disarmed the man, clearing the magazine. With banks burned, highways shut down, and City Hall on fire in Nashville, there was more than 1,000 arrests in Salt Lake night.
Multiple incidents caught on video igniting outrage. A police vehicle accelerating through a crowd. A woman shoved to the ground, unclear why.
I was aggressive towards the police officer.
82, strikingly similar scenes and issues of injustice, 28 years apart.
We've seen this before in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, mirrored by pockets of anarchy nationwide, described as all hell breaking loose in Seattle when police lost control of downtown, crowds destroyed, then took over their vehicles. This video capturing one man removing a high-powered police rifle before a plainclothes security guard disarmed the man, clearing the magazine.
You might feel like you just want to close your eyes with all that's going on. Thank you for tuning in to this very important broadcast, and we pray that you will get the gist of the truth, that you will hear as we present the facts of what is going on. First, let me say we do need to pray for clarity, that we see what we need to see, but we discern rightly. Don't judge by appearance, but understand that this is a call to prayer, and this is a call to not be deceived by what you see. We're going to present to you facts behind the protests, the riots, and the people that are helping them in this edition of Last Day's Voice.
Growing questions about who may be under those masks, sparking the violent wave of protests in Minneapolis and across the country.
But I think our best estimate right now that I heard is about 20% is what we think are Minnesotans, and about 80% are outside.
Officials condemning the agitators. Attorney General Barr alleging outsiders and extremists are fueling the destruction.
In many places, it appears the violence is planned, organized, and driven by anarchic and left extremist groups, far left extremist groups, using Antifa-like tactics, many of whom travel from outside the state to promote the violence.
First of all, legit protesting is being infiltrated by left extremist groups. Let's talk about that.
Minnesota's Attorney General pointed to a disturbing moment where a masked man with an umbrella is seen destroying a business that's unrelated to the tragedy.
That led me to believe that there is real, legitimate evidence that this is a very serious operation being done to tarnish the legitimate protest that is going on.
Law enforcement experts say these outside groups thrive on wreaking havoc.
They live for the fires, the violence, the confrontation. It won't slow them down one bit. The only thing that's going to slow the anarchist groups and the white supremacist groups is an arrest.
So let me first give you a couple of thoughts. First of all, what happened to George is terrible, right? And there's protesting going on that's peaceful during the day. During the day, you see the organization of people who are holding their hands up, holding signs, and going out there in large groups. But it's when nighttime comes that you see a different group coming about. A group that is not there to hold their hands up, but to hold their hands filled with something to throw, something to break. And these people are not there during the day.
Literally staging weapons that they're going to use that evening to throw the bricks at the cops, Trace? Is that how we interpret that? Because that's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's the belief, Sean. I mean, you have these piles of bricks and rocks showing up, as you said, near the various protest sites in cities like New York, Kansas City, Dallas, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and none of the sites are near construction areas, leading many to assume the bricks were planted by outside agitators specifically to stir up trouble. In fact, the New York Police Department says it has evidence that anarchist groups were pushing the protest toward violence and vandalism. Federal law enforcement officials say the violence points to far-left groups like Antifa. Others say far-right groups might also be involved. And many of the looters don't need to be supplied with bricks and rocks because they show up with their own tools in hand, well prepared to destroy property. Police in Minneapolis also found caches of stolen vehicles and incendiary devices in areas where numerous fires have broken out. And in Baltimore, there's evidence of double danger. Police have been sweeping the downtown area after, get this, finding both bricks and bottles with potential accelerants already inside them. But instead of being left out in the open piles, these potential weapons are kind of being hidden in small areas, though it's unclear if they are associated with the protests or groups on either side of the spectrum.
It's not just bricks. Accusations are also being hurled about who is responsible for this destruction. On Monday, President Trump pushed the idea that outside agitators were behind much of the conflict.
Our nation has been gripped by professional anarchists, violent mobs, arsonists, looters, criminals, rioters, Antifa, and others.
Today, the White House doubled down on that idea, going so far as to suggest activists and professional anarchists are invading our communities, staging bricks and weapons to instigate violence. That post and its accompanying video was taken down, and with good reason.
This is all unfounded.
This investigative researcher says that hasn't stopped mythmongers from blaming everyone, from undercover police to the far right, to Antifa to the far left, for planting bricks to goad protesters into violence.
I think it's really important that people don't point fingers at this time when we don't have the fact-checking and the correct information.
But brick by brick, fact-checkers are getting to the bottom of these posts. Like this video in Los Angeles.
I don't know, man. That don't look right to me.
A Jewish community center clarified it placed them there to protect its property.
Some random-ass bricks, bro. Ain't no construction.
And these? Not so random. Video evidence shows they were there before George Floyd was killed.
So even though the White House account took down that video, the damage is already done. They have amplified conspiracy theories through this video and through posting it on the official White House account.
CBC News asked the White House why it posted those claims and then later removed them. The White House did not respond. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, now, there are many groups that are involved in these protests. You're going to see tweets from Donald Trump. You're going to hear of different groups, and they're being called domestic terrorism. You know, they're identifying these criminal organizers and instigators, you know, and trust me, a lot of resources are being used to pinpoint these groups, identify them, and to be able to go after them. You know, they're Antifa-type organizations, groups, not necessarily Antifa, but they're domestic groups. And what's interesting is these people are not from the area. They're coming in from outside the area. And you can see on the screen right now, you know, that they're leftist groups. And these people are not there to protest. They're there for violence. Yes, the destruction is real. What you see on the screen is real. This is not fake news. This is what is going on. And these institutions are there, and they have an agenda. Okay? We knew from the very beginning, here at Last Day's Voice, we knew from the very beginning that, you know, real protests could be infiltrated with other agendas. You know, the president has been attacked in many different ways, but these groups are real. The tweets are there. The evidence is there. The videos are there. You can see for yourself what is going on and how prepared these rioters are. Again, the rioters are not to be confused with the people who are there to really protest. You can tell during the day it's one group, during the night it's another. During the day it's peaceful, during the night all hell breaks loose. You know, they're prepared, meals are prepared, water's prepared, things to create fires are prepared, bricks, you know, all kinds of materials. And some of the people come with their materials with them already. Cars are being bombed. Yes, homemade bombs to ignite fires, you know, and it's not an easy situation. And in the midst of this, they're not being protected from the virus. They're not being protected. But you can see that the people who are concerned about the social lockdown are not out here during the time of these riots, during the time of this disorder. And it's serious, folks. The fires at the Preston is real. The amount of groups is very large. Tens of thousands of people throughout the city, many from outside of the communities. That's what you're seeing on the screen, outside of the community. They say 80% of the rioters, not to be confused with the protest, are there. Now, 80% of the rioters is being said to be from outside of the state, outside of the groups, not local. This is according to the press, you know, and the press conference they just had. This was talked about. And it's interesting that the proof is there, the evidence is there. The news is seeing it, the locals are seeing it, the protesters are noticing it, and it is having an effect. And it is something that has to be dealt with. And what is the agenda by these groups? What is their agenda is what we should be praying about. Why would they go around destroying windows, destroying local businesses, doing these things? Have you prayed about it? Have you thought about what the Bible has to say about it? Is this in line with anything that is prophesied in the Bible? We talk about these things in Last Day's Voice, but also we want to look at the facts. You can see evidence here of them following someone who just broke windows. He had this umbrella. He's dressed in black, which is a trademark dress code for activists. And you can see he turns around because, you know, he's tired of these people following him, wants to know why. Well, of course, they're trying to get to the bottom. Why are you destroying businesses, you know. So this is evidence, folks. You're seeing it with your eyes that things are going on. Meanwhile, we still got to deal with the virus. We still got to be concerned about how this is going on. And the question is rising up. Could the leftists be involved? Could China be involved? Is this by accident? Is it by coincidence? Or is there something more to what is going on? Let's leave it right there.
Attorney General William Barr came out soon after with a press conference video where he said this.
Unfortunately, with the rioting that is occurring in many of our cities around the country, the voices of peaceful protest are being hijacked by violent radical elements. Groups of outside radicals and agitators are exploiting the situation to pursue their own separate and violent agenda. In many places, it appears the violence is planned, organized, and driven by anarchic and left extremist groups, far left extremist groups, using Antifa-like tactics, many of whom travel from outside the state to promote the violence.
Now, expanding on that a bit more, this is a statement from the Justice Department. Barr said, quote, to identify criminal organizers and instigators and to coordinate federal resources with our state and local partners. Federal law enforcement is using our existing network of 56 regional FBI Joint Terrorism Task Forces. Now, he said the violence instigated and carried out by Antifa and other similar groups in connection with the rioting is domestic terrorism and will be treated accordingly. Now, note the key phrase here, and other similar groups. Again, we've seen the focus on Antifa, not on what these other similar groups may be. And so very likely, again, this may not just be Antifa that gets labeled as terrorists and prosecuted possibly as terrorists, but these other groups as well. Now, that said, who are these other groups? We're going to be looking at a few articles now. First off, we have one from Trevor Loudon. He's an author with Epoch Times, one of our contributors. He wrote a story that says, cities burn, but none dare call it communism. Now, Loudon says it's not accurate to call this a normal protest against police brutality and racism, or just as frustration and rage. He says this is a, quote, communist-inspired insurrection, nothing more, nothing less.
So what are your thoughts? Do you believe that the communists is behind this, that China's behind this? What are your thoughts? Post them in the comments. I want to know.
He says in Minneapolis, where the Democratic Socialists of America has close to 600 members, DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, have been, quote, actively supporting rioters and participating in protests.
Okay, so we hear that there's, 600, people posted, and these groups are supporting rioters. So what do you say about that? Do you believe somebody's funding this? Post it in the comments. We want to know.
He says the DSA, which works closely with Antifa-aligned groups, supported a resolution at their national convention in August to form a national working group to help drive collaboration and resource sharing to support our anti-fascist organizing. It's a quote from them. They say it bluntly, quote, 1 foot in the institutions, 1 foot in the streets.
Okay, let me help you out. First of all, there's the peaceful protest. Do not mix this group with the peaceful protest. All right? Now, separate from the peaceful, legitimate people who are out there, for their concerns, for their rights, for their safety, protesting, using their amendments according to the Constitution. Now, separate from that, you got the people who have an agenda, the agenda to create chaos, to create fear, to create damage. There is an agenda, and based on the information being provided, not only by this reporter here, but many different sources, many different Twitter accounts, many different posts and blogs and news affiliates who that's what they do all day is research the news. we see that there are people who join these activist groups. These activist groups believe in the extreme use of destruction to promote their cause. So it is not hard to believe there are people who they have a different idea, an interpretation of what making a difference is, or sounding their voice. Some people sound their voice with chaos and destruction. What is it going to accomplish, though? I mean, come on, guys, you're destroying businesses. And maybe the question should be, is that there an agenda to destroy America? Is there an agenda to cause disruption in society to the point that America can't function? I want you to think about that on Lasley's Voice.
DSA established a network to connect and coordinate the, quote, anti-fascist movement. The document states, quote, "Let's form a national working group to help drive collaboration and resource sharing to support our anti-fascist organizing, because we must fight exploitation, white supremacy, and patriarchy." And it adds, quote, "This resolution is focused on helping locals proactively disrupt fascist organizing in their region." Now, would the operations of DSA in similar groups involved also fall under Trump's new terrorist designation? Loudon pointed as well to a May 27 tweet from Twin Cities DSA in Minneapolis calling for supplies, including supplies to wash away tear gas, materials for shields, and items that could be used as weapons such as hockey sticks. Now, they say they needed the supplies at the 3rd Police Precinct, and notably that same precinct was later set on fire by rioters not long after the DSA issued its notice. Also, the eco-socialist branch of DSA tweeted on May 28th that they were working to, quote, "support the ongoing working class uprising." Now, that's an important thing to remember here, because this is how a lot of these organizations are regarding this, as a revolution, an uprising. Loudon noted another group supporting the riots in the Workers' World Party. He notes that this Stalinist, Trotskyist organization, which supports communist regimes, including those of China, North Korea, and others, issued an article titled, quote, "Against Police Violence and Capitalism, to rebel is justified." And this article explains that part of what's justified in its definition is violence. Loudon notes the article quotes World Workers' Party founder Sam Marcy's defense of the 1992 Los Angeles riots, in which 63 people died. It states, quote, "In times when the bourgeois is up against the wall, when the masses have risen suddenly and unexpectedly, the bourgeois gets most lyrical in abjuring violence. It never occurs to any of them to show that the masses have never made any real leap forward with the theory of nonviolence. Timidity never made it in history." So what do we have there? It's a direct call. Issued a document on May 28th that points to police violence and similar issues in states. None of this will finally be ended until we end this system through revolution, nothing less. The Party for Socialism and Liberation wrote on May 26, quote, "In this absolutely critical period, we sharpen our resolve to build organizations capable of waging militant class struggle against the racist state and the ruling class. Organizations capable of waging militant class struggle against the racist state and the ruling class." Now, note, many DSA branches and communist movements are actively supporting and helping coordinate the riots. Their Twitter accounts are filled with posts like this, including those of some DSA-connected politicians. Many socialist and communist organizations are directly involved. They are actively coordinating and participating. They're doing this openly. There are calls to use the riots as a vehicle for revolution, and they're also calling for violence. They're talking about promoting violence, and they're talking about justifying the use of violence. Going forward, I think a few questions are going to come up. Who finances these groups? Who is leading them? And who are the individuals involved? If they are nonprofits or political organizations, a lot of this information is very likely public, or at the very least, available to governments. Now, DSA is behind several big-name politicians, who I won't name here. DSA has public messaging tying it to the riots and to national coordination of, quote, anti-fascist activities. Now that Antifa and its related organizations have been declared terrorist organizations, what does this mean for DSA and all the individuals connected to it? Now, in other news, rioters are reportedly coming into these communities and committing acts of violence, arson, you name it. They're coming in from outside of these communities, allegedly. Trump tweeted, quote, 80% of the rioters in Minneapolis last night were from out of state. They are harming businesses, especially African-American small businesses, homes, and the community of good, hard-working Minneapolis residents who want peace, equality, and to provide for their families. Epoch Times reported that officials concerned outside groups inciting lawlessness amid Minneapolis protests. The article notes that in Minneapolis, the mayor, Jacob Frey, said during a press conference on May 30th, quote, "We saw more and more people coming from outside of the city. We saw more and more people looking to cause violence in our communities, and I have to say it is not acceptable." The article also notes that in St. Paul, Minnesota, every person arrested on the night of May 29th was from out of state. The mayor there, Melvin Carter, told reporters, he said, local activists confirmed that the violent protesters aren't from Minneapolis. And again, Attorney General William Barr stated on May 30th,
"It is a federal crime to cross state lines or to use interstate facilities to incite or participate in violent rioting, and we will enforce those laws."
Now, some video footage also suggests that people are coming from outside of these communities. Here's one in Minnesota. This is allegedly one of the first individuals to begin smashing things, to begin destroying things. He is a white man, apparently. He's dressed in all black, carrying a black umbrella. Now, there were some reports claiming he was a police officer. There is no evidence I've seen currently showing this. Members of the community appear to try to stop him. They follow him, and he gets aggressive with them. Now, watch what we have here. Now, the question is, who is this individual? Dressed very much like these Black Bloc or Antifa protesters. And you can see that the community does not seem to be happy that he's there. They do not seem to be happy with the actions he has committed smashing these windows. Was this event tied to the Chinese Communist Party's open call to 230? Important bit of history here. This wasn't too long ago, in fact. Chinese Communist Party rallies 230 leftist parties to exploit CCP virus for political gains. This is an article in the Epoch Times, again from Trevor Loudon. Now, he notes an open letter published on April 2nd by the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. Now, the Chinese Communist regime called for, quote, coordinated policies and, quote, mobilization of resources and forces globally, saying that, quote, more from my intel source, Russia is part of this, but the scope of the cyber ops being done by China right now is staggering. They are also using surrogates in Venezuela and Cuba and a few other friendly areas.
Wow. So a lot was said, and today we just wanted to get you thinking about this stuff, because if people are funding from other countries, if there's agendas going on from other countries, Russia, China, you know the drill. We're supposed to have our eyes open, folks. We're supposed to have our discernment on, and we're supposed to recognize the season that we're in. See, at Last Day's Voice, we want to present to you the facts, the news, but we also want to cast out fear, because all this means that Jesus is coming soon. And with that in mind, are you ready? Because trust me, you do not want to miss the rapture. You do not want to miss when our Lord and Savior comes and be stuck in all the mess that is to follow. Hey, I appreciate you tuning in, and I just gave you a lot of food for thought, an update, but the main reason for this emergency update was not to talk about the protests, but to let you know there's more to what's going on than what you see. God bless you, and I pray that you will study that you will make sure that God is first, and most of all, that you will be an example of love and how to walk, overcome, and live and finish the race till Jesus comes. God bless you all. For Last Day's Voice.